So when we talk about internal rotation for pitchers, specifically on the lead leg, there's two main reasons that we focus on that. One would be injury prevention. There's studies that show correlation between lack of internal rotation on the lead leg and elbow issues, specifically UCL. So if we want to try to protect the elbow more, we'll get more internal rotation in the lead hip. The other reason would be helping or making it easier for the pitcher to achieve lead leg block. So if we're doing that, we want to eliminate whatever type of physical limitations we may have so that when they get on the mound, they can perform better. A few things that we do slightly differently than some just basic internal rotation exercises is making sure that the entire pelvis is working with you to achieve that internal rotation. So what I mean by that is this is the ilium bone right here. When we land, this hits where the femur hits on the ground, it's stiff. This side of the ilium is stiff, and we want to be able to rotate around that a little bit. So you see this posterior spot here, this outlet here opening up as we go. If we're not able to do that, then we rely on everything here being stuck and only moving through the hip joint to achieve internal rotation. So obviously, pelvis isn't going to move a ton. This is a little bit of exaggeration of the motion, but the more that we can move with the iliums and have them shift a little bit as we go through the motion, the more we're going to help the joint and not rely on just the hip joint to take all of the stress. So we want to do both things first. We want to be able to rotate and move around the ilium, and then we want the ilium to be stationary and be able to get the internal rotation through the hip joint itself as well. That's when we're going to achieve maximal internal rotation and make it as easy as possible for the athlete to move through that range of motion on the mound. So a simple test that we can do just to see if where your range of motion is, giving you an idea about if you really need, that's really something you need to work on or not, that anyone can do at home, is just have someone pull your leg up to 90 degrees. We want the other toe straight up in the air here. We're going to keep the knee still, and we're going to try to rotate the foot and the leg out and see how much movement that we have. So Cal here has somewhere between 5 to 10 degrees of hip internal rotation. So that's something that we're going to work on to make sure that his landing leg is able to do these things without causing more stress on his body, either in his hip or his elbow, when he's trying to obviously increase velocity or throw 90 pitches in a game. We need to do everything that we can to limit the restrictions of his body and make it as easy as possible for him to do that consistently. So we'll walk through now a few exercises and kind of how we go from the most regress exercise to the most advanced exercises and how we would program that out for someone that's trying to improve hip internal rotation. One of the best things about the rolling arm bar is you can literally do it anywhere. You don't necessarily have to have a weight. I like one. We're going with something light, 18 pounds here. We're gonna bring the opposite leg up in this case, so the right knee up. We're gonna keep the left leg as straight as possible. So he's gonna be as relaxed as possible, and he's simply gonna roll this over, and as he's rolling, he's gonna kind of naturally reach towards the ceiling. So we're now pinning the opposite side down and then unroll from that. Just let the chest go back down and roll back to here. We're pinning the outside of the hip down and basically getting that ilium to stay still on the left side while the right side rolls over it, opening up the backside, that posterior outlet, and also, go ahead one more, and also causing a little internal rotation in the left hip as we roll over that. So now we're gonna stand you up and try to feel that same type of hip internal rotation through a hinge with a constraint. So we have the foam roller here where he's pressing his left knee into the foam roller. You see that basically his ankle, knee, hip are all lined up. He just has a little bit of a squeeze. So we're getting some adductor activation there, holding that in place. And we're gonna try to make sure that that foam roller does not fall as he does this. So from there, he's gonna go to a basic RDL, and he's just gonna feel his right hand reach down to his left foot right to about parallel the ground there, and then bring his hips forward and his chest back up like he's doing a normal RDL. So now we're accomplishing the same thing. Go ahead, do another rep. But we're in, again, a closed chain movement here, and we're in a standing position, which is obviously what we need to be able to do. We have to keep the ball of the foot, the big toe on the ground. We have to keep the knee in place, and our right side is rotating around the left. You should feel this in your left hamstring and your left back pocket opening up as you go down into the hinge motion. As this exercise gets a little bit easier, we can add a little bit of a load to it and have him do the same thing with a weight in his hand. So now we're just adding strength to that range of motion and making sure that we're giving him the ability to hold that new range of motion. We're not just opening him up and possibly putting him in a weaker position, but we're strengthening through that new range of motion. The next progression would be getting him out of taking one constraint away, so taking the foam roller away from the wall, getting him more in open space, and then we're still gonna bias him towards internal rotation by elevating the front foot, which puts him a little bit more of a mid stance. Like as you're walking, you're going to be getting into hip internal rotation. That's basically what we're mimicking here. So we have him again, light dumbbell. We're gonna have some weight. We're gonna advance it again in weight with this as well, and probably go a little bit heavier than we would on the single leg RDL against the wall. But here we're gonna have him add in a little bit of a hip shift as we go through the motion. So he's gonna think about taking the back knee straight down on the ground. As he does that, he's rotating into the hip just a touch. So he should feel that pelvis actually turning as he goes down a small amount. And then he's doing a great job of keeping that knee still. What we don't want to see here is him go down and flare that knee out. Now we're losing that internal rotation because everything's going out. So hold that right where it's supposed to be, like we're pushing the foam roller into the wall, and go make sure the back knee is going straight up and down. So the next progression would be taking him out of the sagittal plane and more into the frontal plane. You could argue that something with a hip shift like this has some frontal and rotational components to it, or transverse components to it. I would agree with you, but just for sake of being more obvious, we're gonna go straight frontal plane here. So as he goes down with this one, we're doing just basically a lateral lunge. It's a little bit more of a hinge than your traditional lateral lunge. We have the foot elevated here. We wanna keep big toe, ball of the foot on the ground. We wanna keep knee from flaring out. We wanna keep it in a little bit, and we wanna feel, again, a little bit of that rotation, almost taking the hip back, feeling that back pocket open up in the backside there without the knee flaring open. So if you're doing it wrong, you're gonna flare that open, foot's gonna come out or slide open. That's creating more space for you, which is putting you in more external rotation, which we don't want in this exercise. We're trying to really hammer that internal rotation. We've covered sagittal plane, frontal plane, so now we're going to transverse plane. That's more the natural progression with any exercises we do when we're working on something like hip internal rotation. It's really no different. So we have them, we're gonna have them move more dynamically. We're taking away pretty much all of the constraints now. So we're trying to blend it more and more into an athletic movement. So from here, Cal's gonna do a reverse lunge, go straight down with the hip and let his upper body rotate as he goes down. So big keys here, keeping the ball of the foot, big toe, ball of the foot, knee, all in the straight line, not letting that flare out, not letting the foot roll over like we've talked about in some of the other exercises, and then making sure that as he comes up, he's getting full hip extension and not being stuck in flexion. So we're going to get into really good hip internal rotation here, and then we're teaching our body to come out of that hip internal rotation and get more extension and external rotation on the way up in a rotational movement. So we're gonna retest after going through all of those exercises to see if what we did actually improved. We're starting in the same position, rotating out. We have about twice as much hip internal rotation as we did before. So if he was at 10 before, he's probably at right around 20. So we're looking at a 10 to 15 degree improvement going through those exercises. Will it be perfect like this forever? Probably not, but it means that we're on the right direction and we're strengthening him while increasing range of motion, which is exactly what we want to do with athletes, as opposed to just stretching them where they have this range of motion that they can't control. So if we're looking at all the movements that we're doing using our handy dandy pelvis here, there's gonna be two main things that we're focusing on. And they'll be a little bit different if it's open chain versus closed chain, but it's gonna be the same principles. So the number one thing is we're gonna work on opening this posterior outlet. A lot of people that struggle with internal rotation have a closed posterior outlet right here where the ilium's actually externally rotated and we're closed off on that side. And we can't rotate around this left ilium in the case that we're talking about right now with a right-handed pitcher. It's stuck closed. So we want to work on getting that moving and opening up that outlet. The other piece is internal rotation of the hip from the actual capsule, which would be kind of the second domino to fall here. So we want to think that this stays in place and we're rotating the pelvis around the actual head of the femur here, as opposed to everything being a block and just kind of rotating together. So keep those two pictures in your mind as we go through this, whether we're closed chain or open chain. We want to feel like at first this is stuck together when we're rotating and opening that posterior outlet, and then the secondary movement is keeping this still and rotating the pelvis around the femur. If you like that video and you're looking for more videos with me using this pelvis, please like and subscribe and leave a comment about what you'd like to see next.